So here's the deal. I get it. Everyone and their sister does best class setup videos on YouTube for Call of Duty, for any Call of Duty game. And I've done it too, but I like to be a little bit different and not do them 3 times a week or once a week or anything like that. So I was trying to think of a way to do this where it kind of won't be overwhelming. And the reason why I make more than one of them is because weapons frequently get updated in Call of Duty games, and on top of that, new weapons are added into the game. And I figure a good way to do this is to do one of these videos for every single season. Now, that's because new weapons get added into the game, updates happen to different weapons, and I feel like every 2 months or so is a good amount of time to cover this subject. On top of that, even if the new weapons are not in the top 5 weapons for that season, I'm still going to give you a best class setup for those weapons as well, simply because I want to stay up to date on things, and I think this is a good solution. So I want to hear what you guys have to say. Do you think this is too often to do best class setups? Too little? Let me know what you think down in the comments, but without further ado, let's look at the 5 best classes in Season 2. Oh, and speaking of best classes, later tonight, actually as soon as this video goes live, I'm going to be streaming over on Twitch, and I'm going to be using whatever classes you guys pick. So if you want to check out my live stream and come hang out, it'll be the first link down in the description. I'll be live as soon as this video goes up, so hopefully I see you there later tonight. So this is definitely not going to be one of the top 5 classes, but since it's Season 2, I thought we'd definitely look at both weapons, starting out with the Stryker 45. Now, like I said, this is not a top 5 weapon. This is not a top 5 class, but here is my favorite class setup for the Stryker. So for any good class setup, you need to recognize what a weapon is good at and then build a class setup to put you in those situations. So the Stryker 45 is good at mid-range gunfights and if you get headshots. So what do you want? A class that sets you up to be in that range and for you to be as accurate as possible. Now, this isn't easy with the Stryker 45 because one, for an SMG, it's got a lot of recoil, and number 2, the iron sights, in my opinion at least, really suck. So that's what we're looking at when we build this class. So as far as the attachments that I'm using here, I first of all use the 400mm stainless steel barrel. It's going to increase damage range, bullet velocity, and recoil control. The key there is the recoil control. Now, this is because, like I said before, I don't love the recoil on this gun, and it's going to improve those mid-range length kills that you can actually get. Now, the downside to this is it hurts your aim down sight speed and movement speed, which sucks, but like I said, that doesn't matter too much because of the situations that you want to put yourself in with this weapon. The second attachment to make up for the lack of aim down sight speed is the stock that we're using, the XRK Gen 3 Survivalist series. This is going to improve your aim down sight speed and decrease your aiming stability, which is basically just your idle sway. Whenever you see a trade-off like this, it's always a good trade-off. Idle sway is not a huge deal, whereas aim down sight speed definitely is. Now, as I said before, don't like the iron sights, so basically just pick your type of optic that you enjoy. The one I'm using here is the Cronin Mini Reflex, and then after this, I use the 45 round mags. Now, this is a newer thing for me, and you're going to see this throughout the video. Instead of using sleight of hand, I'm actually using extended mags instead, and trying to reload less. In other words, optimize the situations where I'm actually reloading. This is going to help me not to get caught with my pants down, essentially. And then the final attachment is the FTAC 60 series rubber. This is going to improve the recoil control and decrease the aiming stability. So once again, more idle sway, but less recoil. Once again, a really good trade-off. So as you can see, this class is completely based around less recoil, more control, get more headshots, and extend that mid-range. As far as the rest of the class setup goes, what I'm using is the Deagle as my secondary weapon. I'm essentially using this just in case I run out of ammo, so I have some sort of backup. As far as perks, I've got EOD, which basically is just there to reduce explosive damage. I think it's the best first perk. I'm pretty much going to use this on every single one of my classes. On top of that, I'm using Ghost. This is to stay off the radar. I essentially use Ghost on any class where I'm keeping my distance a little bit more, being more strategic with my engagements, and then I use Restock on any super aggressive rushing classes because that allows me to use Stim more. And then after that, I am also going to be using Tracker. This is just to see where the enemies are going. If I run into a lot of people who are using stuns or grenades like that, I will switch this out for Battle Hardened mid-game. As far as lethal and tactical, I think I use the same thing on every class, but Semtex and Stim. Stim is a lifesaver. Use it. If you're not already using it, get used to using it. It's amazing. So now that we're 5 minutes into the video, let's dive into the actual top 5 best class setups. And I think this first one you're going to be shocked by because it's a shotgun that is not the 725. Yes, the R90 is incredible. Now, the magic of this gun is you never have to aim down sights with it. In fact, I implore you not to aim down sights when using this weapon because it is so much better if you don't. And plus, you can design a class where aim down sight speed doesn't matter whatsoever, and all that matters is your range and sprint out time. So what I mean by this is the first attachment that I'm using is the choke. You have a tighter pellet spread, extended damage range, and the trade-off is aim down sight speed, which is fine because we're never going to aim down sights. After this, I'm also using the Forged Tack Sentry barrel. This is once again going to improve your damage range and tighter pellet spread, and once again a worse aim down sight speed. After this one I'm not 100% sure on, but I'm using the 5 megawatt laser, and this one is going to improve your hip fire accuracy and sprint to fire speed. Now, the downside to this is that people will see you coming because you have a laser pointed out the end of your weapon. It's kind of a good trade-off. You are going to get longer range kills, and the big trade-off there is the sprint to fire speed because I am running around like a madman while using this class. After this, I'm also going to use the stippled grip tape, not for the aim down sight speed, but for the sprint out time, and finally, sleight of hand. Now, sleight of hand is good on this weapon because you're loading one bullet into the weapon at a time. That's where you're going to really see the difference. Like I said, the magic of this weapon is the fact that you never, ever have to aim down sights. It honestly kind of reminds me a little bit of the Brecci from Black Ops 3, but not quite as annoying. The fact that it actually has better range than the Brecci, and you just nuke people up close. The downside to this weapon is it's very difficult to kill people at long or medium ranges, which means I have to use a secondary of a deagle just to clear up those people who are sitting at that middle long range that I really have to engage with. Now, I am using a little bit different perks here. First of all, instead of EOD, I'm using double time just so I can run around the map faster, get to where A to B a lot quicker. After that, I am also using restock. This is because I'm running around like a madman, I use a lot more stims, which means I need more stims, which I can get more with restock. And then finally, I'm using tracker so I can see where enemy footsteps are and kind of have a better idea of how to engage better because I'm only good at close quarters. Speaking of which, this gun does not do good on long range maps, so really the only time I'm actually using this is in close quarters maps like Vacant, Shipment, Ramazah, Petrograd, things like those. And once again with lethal and tactical, I'm using Semtex and Stim. I'm just going to stop saying that because I use that on literally every class. After this, coming in at number 4, we actually have a new weapon, the Grau 556. Now, this one is a new weapon and it is really good. It could probably be even higher on this list, but there's some other weapons that are just absolutely beastly in this game. And with this weapon, the cool thing about the Grau is that you can kind of design this weapon however you want to use it. If you want to use it like an SMG, you can design your class for that. If you want to use it like a longer range AR, you can design your class for that. The one downside to the Grau is it has a slower time to kill up close. So generally speaking, I like to stick to medium to long ranges, and that's where it's going to absolutely clean up people with good headshot damage. So I like to use a more AR version of this weapon, but just know that if you don't like this weapon, you can use the SMG version. The reason why I don't like it is because I find this weapon has a little bit of weird recoil, and when you make the SMG version of this weapon, that is amplified, whereas when you make the AR version of the Grau, you have better recoil. So the attachments that I'm using here are the FSS 26.4 Archangel barrel. This is going to increase your damage range, bullet velocity, and recoil control for a decreased aim down sight speed and movement speed. The big thing there for me is actually the recoil control, and it's a bonus that you get extra damage. The other cool thing about the Grau 556 is that for each different barrel that you use, you actually have different iron sights, and personally, this barrel that we're talking about here, in my opinion, has the best iron sights, so no reason to use any red dot, especially with this barrel. The next thing I'm using is the tack laser. This is a really good attachment. I use it on a lot of weapons. You get faster aim down sight speed, aiming stability, and aiming walking steadiness, in other words, strafe speed. The only downside to this is when you're aiming down sights, there is a laser. So what you have to do is not aim down sights very often, and there's basically no downside to this attachment whatsoever. After this, I'm also using the Commando foregrip for recoil stabilization, aiming stability, and the only downside is less movement speed. Once again, I find this recoil weird on this weapon, so anything I can do to counteract that, I am doing. After this, I'm also using the 50 round mags, once again, using this instead of of sleight of hand, being more tactful with my reloads, and I have had some pretty good success with that. And then finally, the XRK Void 2. This is going to be the thing that increases my sprint to fire speed and aim down sight speed. The only downside is a little bit more recoil control, which we've counteracted with other attachments, and aiming stability, which I've talked about before, is not a big deal whatsoever. This is a really good class. It's going to excel at mid to long range. Like I said before, you can design this as an SMG. I just prefer it as an AR. This is the class I like to use. And as far as the rest of the class goes, it's actually very similar to the Stryker 45 class. Once again, using the Deagle, perks with EOD, Ghost, Tracker, and you know the lethal and tactical I'm using. So coming in at number 3, I know you're shocked that this is not number 1. It is the M4. Now, I do think there's better weapons than this, and we'll, of course, get to them in a second. But the magic of the M4 is the fact that it has really low recoil with incredibly good stats. This gun is good up close, at long range, pretty much in every single situation. So this gives you the freedom to make your class exactly how you want it, because you don't really have to counteract for extremely bad recoil or anything like that. Now, as far as the attachments I use on here, it's a little bit weird, but I like to use, first of all, no stock. This is going to improve your movement speed and aim down sight speed. The downside is aiming stability, which isn't a big deal, and recoil control. Now, I do like to use a couple of attachments to make up for that recoil control, the first of which is the Corvus Custom Marksman Barrel. So this is going to improve my damage range, bullet velocity, and recoil control. So I have longer range to kill people and less recoil, which are both good. Now, the downside is aim down sight speed and movement speed, which we do make up for with the no stock, and we're also going to make up for with the stippled grip tape. It's going to improve both the aim down sight speed and the sprint to fire speed, with the downside of aiming stability. Honestly, every time you use stippled grip tape, it's a good attachment, such a good trade-off. Once again, using extended mags, because once again, I don't need sleight of hand if I'm using the extended mags. I can more correctly choose when I reload. Great attachment. And then finally, the Merc foregrip. This is also going to help my recoil control and hip fire accuracy, which I actually find important with this gun because it's so good up close. I can just hip fire, take people down. This is going to decrease the movement speed while aiming down sights. In other words, your strafe speed and aim down sight speed. But once again, we have other attachments to make up for that. This class is so good. I really highly recommend, if you can use this gun without a red dot or any sort of optics, do so. It has such low recoil that you don't need any sort of red dot, and then this gun is just an absolute beast. There's really not much else for me to say as far as the rest of the class. Once again, using either the Deagle or the 357 Magnum. And then as far as attachments, with this one, I don't use Ghost. I use Restock because I find having those extra stims just important with this gun. This is a gun that I go on really long streaks with, so that Restock is important. And then you know the lethal and tactical that I'm using. So next up at number 2, we've got the MP5. Now, the thing is, this is probably my favorite class on the list, in my opinion, the most fun to use, but I don't think it's the best, so that's why it's not at number 1. Also, this is not a good Call of Duty League class. This is good for public matches. In CDL, everyone always uses the 10mm rounds on this weapon to extend the range. That is not what I'm using here. This is a run and gun class setup, and my god, is it good. You gotta try this out. So first things first, the barrel that I'm using, the monolithic integral suppressor. So first of all, this has sound suppression, so you don't show up when you shoot whatsoever, but it also improves your bullet velocity. Now, the downside of this is slower aim down sight speed, which of course we make up for once again with the stippled grip tape. Now, after this, I also improve the aim down sight speed with the tack laser. Once again, aim down sight speed, aiming stability, and aiming walking steadiness all improved, and the only downside is when you aim this weapon, there's a laser that shows up. It is so worth it. Now, instead of using the 10mm rounds, I use the 45 round mags. This makes it so I have to reload less often, and then I also, on top of that, use sleight of hand. This is a super fast run and gun setup, and because of that, the perks that I use with it are double time, once again, similar to the R90 class, Restock, similar to what we saw before, and then finally, Tracker. This is a run and gun class. You want to be constantly moving. The fact that you're using the suppressor means you're not going to show up, and because you're not using the 10mm rounds, 1, the weapon actually has less recoil, and 2, it means that you want to be up close and personal. This is an SMG. It honestly reminds me of playing with the MP5 suppressed back in Call of Duty 4. Honestly, this class is so much fun. I highly recommend it. Try it out. it is good. And then finally, the best class and the best weapon is the Ram 7. You shouldn't be surprised by this one if you followed the channel for a while, but if you're new, you might not know this. The Ram 7 is literally just a better version of the M4 in almost every single way possible. Time to kill, rate of fire, damage profile, literally well, it's actually the same damage profile. The Ram 7 just has better headshots, but literally this is just a better version of the M4. The downside to this weapon is it has more recoil than the M4, which means you got to be a little bit better to actually use this weapon and excel with it. But if you do and are good enough with this weapon, you will destroy anyone who is using the M4. So what is a good class setup for this? Well, first of all, I like to use a red dot sight. I do not like the iron sights on this weapon whatsoever, so I use a red dot sight. Kind of a waste of attachment, but I just don't like the iron sights. After this, I'm using the XRK Ranger barrel. This is going to improve your damage range, bullet velocity, and recoil control. That recoil control on this weapon is very, very important. After this, once again, using the 50 round mags, extended mags, same reasons as before. Then the stippled grip tape, once again to improve the aim down sight speed and sprint to fire speed. You may have noticed by now, a lot of my classes use a lot of the same attachments. And then finally, the stock that I use is the XRK close quarters stock. This is going to improve my aim down sight speed, a trade-off for aiming stability. Now, if you use this and you find that you still have too much recoil, just use some recoil control attachments, an under barrel or something like that. Personally, this is fine for me. The time to kill on this weapon is absolutely insane. At short range, long range, no matter the gunfight I'm getting into, this should be the best weapon in the game, and in my opinion, the best class as well. And once again, a similar class to what we saw before: EOD, restock, tracker as my perks, and then the same things as we saw before on all of the other classes. So in my opinion, these are the 5 best classes in the game. All of them you can excel with. A couple of them you want to use on those smaller maps, especially the R90 shotgun. On smaller maps, that thing absolutely shreds. But now I want to hear what your favorite classes are. Let me know down in the comments what weapons you like to use, what are your favorite classes, all of that kind of stuff. Also, if you found this video informative and enjoyed it, I always do appreciate it if you do hit that like button. And if you like what you see here, want to stay up to date on all my videos, make sure you hit that subscribe button, make sure you turn notifications on. I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, peace out.
Now I gotta say goodbye.